Welcome to a Kirblog about educational games for the PC or for the Mac that you played when you might have been less than 5 years old. If anybody recognizes that, then this is the fucking Kirblog for you. Let me tell you what. As I've also just given this Kirblog an R rating, and talking about children's educational games, good. I'm tackling this one in particular because I waited until the last second to record this week's Kirblog, so I apologize to everybody for kind of breaking the chain of the relatively deep personal topics I've been doing lately about building stories and character creation and story creation, et cetera, all that sort of thing. But I wanted to take a quick break to just talk about something a little quick and fun and simple. This comes from Demi-Fiend of Time. A suggestion is a continuation for this, any nostalgic educational games you can think of, like Zoom Beanies. This question was left, I believe, on the Kirblog that I did about all the old Flash games that I used to play. That was, I think, from back in February by this point already. So I'll have a link to that in case you haven't seen that one. But in the meantime, yes, I actually have quite a bit to talk about for this one, believe it or not. But then again, I think probably a lot of kids, even now, I mean, even though I can't imagine, what school is like for kids these days, and I don't mean that in an old man way. I just literally, I don't understand. I have no idea like what it's like in just the digital age, but I imagine there's still got to be educational games, maybe not for the same companies that I'm going to be talking about in a minute, but for kids in elementary school and up, et cetera, who are interested in this sort of thing. But in the digital age, I don't fully get like how everything works with that sort of thing. So I might be learning something by the end of this one. But to anybody maybe close to my age range, back when it wasn't so easy to get your hands on a computer or a game system or whatever, there's quite a lot of stories I have to tell about this sort of thing. My earliest memory of playing an educational / edutainment / kids activity type thing on a computer was the Jumpstart series. I played, I believe, Jumpstart first grade all the way back in, 1995, I think might have been. Yes, and this was one of my first memories of just like playing on a computer at all. Was this game? It was at a friend's house. I was visiting. We had some close friends that had moved away to Florida, and I think we were visiting them one summer or something, and they had a computer and they had this Jumpstart game on it with this little dog character. And I remember distinctly two major things on that: a pizza making mini game. It was all kids activity mini games or whatever like that. But that one, and then also some type of like MS Paint style program that was really just like hitting the paint tool into like a bunch of coloring book pictures. The most distinct thing from that was we also had a printer, a color printer, the friend did at the time. And so I just colored a bunch of the pre-made pictures, most of which were just pictures of cartoon fruit characters, not to be confused with the Fruities for any of my UK listeners, or European listeners in general, I suppose. It was just like a bunch of fruits and then a train, and I just colored those, and then I told a story with the text that I could put underneath them. Like, one day, Chris had an apple to eat, then he had a banana, then he had grapes, then he had watermelon, even though he doesn't even really like watermelon that much, then he had a bunch of other stuff, and then eventually he went on a train and went back home. The end. That was the story. Good. That was from what I can recall, my earliest memory of doing something like that. But then the big one, the big company that I think most of the people my age were familiar with, because that's all we did after school. When we had like milk and cookies was our after school program. That's what they called it, because we were given milk and cookies when we had to wait until our parents would come pick us up. Was all the Macintosh computers, the early shitty Macs on installed or put in all the major rooms in our classrooms and in my elementary schools. Had lots and lots and lots of stuff from The Learning Company. I regret to say that I did not grow up on the Reader Rabbit series, unfortunately, which I know is probably like a big one that a lot of people know of, but I don't think I ever actually played any of those before. I played a shit ton of other ones, and I believe they're all out of order compared to like when they came out, but there's a whole list of them. The first of that series that I remember really investing a lot of time into was the Treasure Hunter. It was all part of the what was it, like the Super Solvers series with the little character with like the what is it, the baseball cap and like the blue jacket that would go over them, so you couldn't tell like if they were a boy or a girl or whatever. They were just like a generic like kid trying to stop Morty Maxwell, the master of mischief, in all these games. Yeah, the first of those that I played were the what I thought was the trio of Treasure Mountain, Treasure Cove, and Treasure Galaxy. Turned out after that I played also Treasure Math Storm, which was apparently I think like right after Treasure Mountain because it was the same layout. And basically these games had the same kind of layout. For those of you who hadn't played these before, if you look up some footage of them or whatever, the Treasure series of the Super Solvers Learning Company games where you play as a character who goes around 3 levels. In each of those 3 levels, you have to capture, either an elf or what was it, like a little starfish guy, or like a star, like just a regular, like a little star sprite guy or something. And when you capture them with your magical like bubble or your net or whatever your thing was that you could use to capture them for whatever game it was, you have to answer a question, and if you get it right, they give you a clue. And by finding out 3 different clues in each level, then you go to you have to like use some sort of magical thing, a separate item that you use that you have like a limited amount of, to scan the area, like different like parts of the environment for a clue on what will lead you to the next area. So say like the 3 clues are like, red, like square-shaped flowers in a bush, and there are 3 of them in that bush. Then you find the bush that has 3 square-shaped red flowers in it or whatever, and then you do your thing, and then it opens up the gate into... Oh, no, you find the key. That's right. You find a key that allows you to open up, or some kind of like thing that opens up the next area. And you do this 3 times, 3 different levels. A lot of kids who are getting feasibly smarter would learn how to just, navigate around and bullshit it through just having 2 of the clues. And you could there's like a shop where you could like buy extra things and like load up on your bubbles or your nets or whatever. You could, restock on your items and things. So it's the same basic kind of setup for what the game was in each of those, but just with different like motifs and different subjects. You could do like math and English and science or whatever, depending. And then at the end, you'd fight like sort of a boss character, or maybe even just like play a cut scene that would, signify, oh, you did it, and you get a little prize. You get like a little shitty sprite of like, here's a telescope or something, some little bullshit trinket, and then you put it back in your clubhouse. And then the point, which actually, this is why I bought one of these games. I actually owned Treasure Cove, the underwater one, for my PC back at home, because in that one, for instance, the more points you get and the more prizes you obtain and everything, then the more you would build this rainbow bridge that would lead over to the castle, which was Treasure Mountain. Actually, I was like, oh, it's that game, hey. And then you would go through there and then you would get the ending of the game. And I remember playing it once in a while on my downtime to try to put more and more points towards each piece of the rainbow bridge or whatever. But then after a while, I just got to the point where I'm like, I don't think I really care enough about this shit that I'm just going to forget it, whatever. So I just kind of gave up on that. But I played a bunch of those. And then there were a couple other games from that series, 2 in particular that we had on our computers, were Gizmos and Gadgets and Mission Think. These are part of the same Learning Company's Super Solver series. But Gizmos and Gadgets was the one that like everybody I knew play. Oh, and also Midnight Rescue. That was another one too. Where you played as this kid and you go around. Like Midnight Rescue was you had to like go and like fight these robot things that were like taking over the school at night, and you were like going in there sneaking around and stuff. And again, there was still a lot of educational stuff integrated. Like also Gizmos and Gadgets, you had to like collect these different pieces of vehicles that you could race Morty Maxwell in these different races with different types of vehicles and things. And then to get the different pieces and the fuel and everything you needed, you'd have to go to these different rooms while avoiding robots or whatever. And you had to like solve these little puzzles that were, or like they were like different like mechanical like devices, like pulley systems and things like that. You had to like align all the pieces correctly, and then you get something, and then you could go back and, okay, now I have this super powerful blimp that can, go super fast, and I'll be able to win the race or whatever, and then you get more points that way. That was just like the one that I recall the most people playing all the time. The one that I remember being really captivated by, which I think looking back on it wasn't as good as I remembered, and I was kind of expecting that to happen, was the Mission Think game, which involved you having to do some similar kind of things as Gizmos and Gadgets, where you mainly had to run around these different rooms and collecting things and getting pieces and stuff. And it was specifically for this board game that you'd be playing against Morty Maxwell, the Master of Mischief. And you'd basically have like a grid. It was kind of like a Duel Monsters, like Yu-Gi-Oh type of board with like different types of environments and things, kind of like in the Duelist Kingdom arc. That sort of visuals, and you'd have like these different pieces to move around and kind of progress through it and everything. You can move in different ways and have different commands and things. It was pretty cool. I remember it being very interesting, but I think when I looked back on some footage of it, I was like, oh, this system actually wasn't as like complicated or interesting as I recall it being as a child. Now, to be fair, too, I think a lot of these games don't hold up as well as we thought that we did, because the reality is we played a lot of these games because that's all we could play, especially if we didn't know where to find stuff like freearcade.com or whatever, like I was talking about in the other Kirblog, or if we didn't have like our Game Boys or something, or even just in general. I think if even with my Game Boy, I remember still being captivated enough by these like mysterious games that were only playable at my school because I didn't even know where to go buy them or whatever. I wasn't even thinking about that. They were just so associated with like my after school time or like during computer class or whatever that I wouldn't think to go to them. But funnily enough, I feel like some of them definitely did leave a big mark on like, on the history of gaming, I guess you could say. Because then, of course, there's the wonderful Oregon Trail, another Learning Company game, which I didn't realize that was the Learning Company until years later. But that's a game that I knew everybody loved to play. And that still has, like, a special place in people's hearts. There was this, I went to an arcade in L.A. A couple nights ago, and I found this, they had a little pawn shop next to it with, like, this it had this one really cool painting of just like a bunch of different like video game locations all assembled into one big map, and they had like the Mushroom Kingdom and like all these different places from various like famous video games, and then just like mixed in there was the Oregon Trail, like just as a location. So it's like that in and of itself shows this was a game that kind of went above and beyond that. Although speaking of world maps, the World in the World is Commerce San Diego games, which I did not get to play much of, but I know that that's a big one for people, like a big series and the whole franchise in and of itself. Plus with the TV show, like the cartoon series and the game show, etc. That was a big thing. There was one PC Carbon San Diego game that I played years ago. I don't know which one it is, and if any of you guys out there recognize this, all I know is that it had like a really, really cool overworld that was kind of like Zelda-esque, and it was all these different locations. I remember it being really, really cool looking, but I don't know which Carmen San Diego game it was. So if any of you guys out there grew up with those and maybe might know what I'm talking about, link me to some footage or something, or whatever, if you think you might know what it is. There were also some other ones that actually, speaking of which, that I can't remember like what the name was or what company made it or whatever, but there were two games I listed down on here. I have a little cheat sheet in front of me, sorry. There was some sort of like game where you could play as like one of many, many, many different types of fish, and you could move around. Like it was like an up, down, left, right, but it was side scrolling, but you could move up, down, left, right, and swim around. And you go around this massive like coral reef type of environment, and you would basically have to survive by eating whatever type of fish that creature you were playing. As you could be other sea creatures as well, but it was mostly fish. And all I remember was always picking the shark because fucking it was 10 or whatever at the time, and going around trying to eat all the other smaller fish. And you had to eat as much as possible to keep your character healthy and alive without them just killing over and dying. So that was one that we had on our computers back in the day, if anybody knows that one. And then this one's really obscure, and I really doubt anyone's going to know what it is, but it was some type of like game where I think it was mainly a math game, and it was particularly, or maybe this might have just been a part of it, I'm not 100% sure, but it was a game that involved having to like learn how to add cents, like how many, how much does it add up to $1 if you pick however many quarters or however many nickels, and like you had to like add up the cents to make up whatever the amount of money they were asking for, type of thing. And so they would ask you, and it would have voices in it. And all I remember from this, and it is permanently like it's fixated itself in my brain, is when you would solve a problem right, this little like cartoon face would come in, and like his hair would like pop out like Medusa hair or something, and he'd go like "Doki," and then so every time you keep solving the problem, you go "Doki," and that just now sometimes when I'm confirming okay to somebody, I say okay. I go, okay. Just sometimes I do that. Like that's how like ingrained it is in me. And also like when you complete like a round of like 10 questions or whatever after the last, okay, you get a little Yahoo! To congratulate you for a job well done. So yeah, I'm not expecting anybody to know those. But I mean, maybe this is the only platform I'd have to like search the internet for whatever the fuck those games are. Also, there was, I'm sad to say, unfortunately, because I'm sure everybody's going to be screaming at me about this, I did not play a whole lot of the educational Mario games. I didn't really play much of Mario Teaches Typing. or even on the Super Nintendo, like Mario's Missing or Mario's Time Machine. I think I rented those two once each, and then I was like, okay, well, fuck that, not interested. But even like Teach's Typing or like Mario's Fundamentals or whatever, like the Game Gallery one with like Charles Martinet, like I guess I'm gonna go fishing and all that shit. I did not play those, unfortunately. Like if I think very briefly at like other friends' houses who might have had them, but I never owned them. I never really like got to spend a whole lot of time with them, which is weird considering how much of a Nintendo freak I am. But yeah, sorry to disappoint on that. But the last series of the many educational games I played that I'm very excited to talk about, I played these a lot earlier in the chronology of what I'm talking about, but I wanted to save these to last because these were my favorites above all else, was MECC's The Muncher series. These were great. I think that more so than anything, these were the ones I enjoyed. Probably just because I loved the characters so much. Like they were really Super Muncher, or just the Muncher in general, not specifically Super Muncher, and the Troggles. Like were such great designs. Like I don't. There's just something about them that I thought was really cute and fun. I love to draw them all the time. I'd have little like sign language, like hand signs for like representing each of those characters or whatever. Like Reggie was one of them. I remember, and like Smarty and some other one. I can't remember all their names. Helper, I think, was one of them. Yeah, I loved those games. I played Word Muncher and Number Muncher a lot. Those were the ones that we had in the beginning, and then Super Muncher was the one that came after that, I believe, and that was my shit. I loved that game. I loved the Super Muncher design with the little cape and all that stuff. He was great, and the little fun cutscenes in between. Actually, no, sorry, the mini games in between. Most of which were very easy. It was like, so basically, if you haven't played the Muncher series before, it's a grid. I think it's like a 5x5 grid, I believe. And you move this little character around, you have to munch whatever the subject at the top of the screen is. So if it's like, prime numbers, you eat all the prime numbers. If it's like animals, you eat, like mammals, you eat all the mammal words. And these little Troggle, like demon monster things would come in from the side and try to chase you around. They would eat certain words, and they would like change words if they moved past something or whatever. And basically, you had to avoid them. And then in Super Muncher, if you score a certain number of points, a little like space would open up for you to go in and transform into Super Muncher, and you could kill the Troggles and score extra points, and then eat a bunch of the different words. You could eat anything on the screen. It didn't have to specifically be whatever the subject was. I think you could just like eat lots of stuff and score major points and everything until your power ran out. And then in between each of the rounds, there'd be like this little special mini game you could play. One of which was like you have to. It was all leading up to some kind of plot of fighting, like the evil Dr. Frankentroggle or whatever. But like the first one, you had to like guess which one of the Troggles it was that was like walking by, is like in like a little disguise or something. The other one was you had to remember what the password was, like is hidden behind a bush or something. And the third one is, I think, when you have to fly up a like a mountain or something, and you had to collect the numbers that are falling and dodge all these little like rocks and things that are falling down. And that game was like fucking impossible, so you had to like keep doing it over and over until eventually you complete enough rounds, and then you have a little fun cutscene where you just defeat Dr. Frankentroggle, and then that was the end of that. I loved that series so much that I remember I even went out and I bought I think it was either Math or Word Munchers Deluxe, which was like the next level of that series, and they like updated the art style to be kind of like goofy, cartoony, a little different than I remembered. And they had like all these like weird, elaborate like cartoon cutscenes. I remember there was something where they like recreated the big final scene from The Wizard of Oz using the Word Munchers characters. And I was like, this is a little weird, but yes, those definitely more than anything. Even though I loved all the other stuff I mentioned before, those hold a special place in my heart. I think that's gonna wrap us up. So I'm actually curious because, again, like I was saying before, I don't know if kids even give enough of a shit to play educational games, considering they can, play mobile games on I sound like an old man, but I really am. I'm just curious because I don't know, like, especially to my younger viewers, I don't know if you even have educational games like this. I don't know what the current ones out there are like, if there are any. I'm sure there's got to be, but I don't know what they would be. I know there's Curiosityville, which was a series that I worked on as Pablo, little frog guy. So I voiced that character on that. But that's more of a website that just has educational like game things like built into it specifically. But yeah, I don't know. So I'm curious to hear some stories about this. So that's going to wrap us up. In the comments below, tell me specifically first to the younger viewers, what are your current educational games like? Have you played any of the ones that I mentioned on this Kirblog? Do they still have those on PCs and Macs, like around schools and things? Is there anything like that you kind of enjoyed in between playing your actual video games that you don't have access to feasibly? And then to my older viewers, Did you play a lot of these games that I mentioned? Were there other ones that I didn't mention that you really liked? Mention that. Leave a comment about that, or any particular memories of the games that I did mention on here that you wanted to share, anything like that. If you have future Kirblog topic suggestions, leave a comment about that too. Or if you have, or if you want to hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, anything like that, etc. And that'll do it. Thanks for listening. Hope this was semi-entertaining for the last 20 minutes or so. I'll get back to probably a more interesting and serious related Kirblog topic in the next weekend. March is almost over. I can't even process that. Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's it. All right, I'll catch you all later. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Blah, blah, blah. I love you all. Bye-bye.